Timothy, ready? I'd like to call the study session to order. Let the record reflect that all board members are present. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I would just first of all like to, we haven't met for 3 weeks here, but the board did meet last Friday to continue along the process with our superintendent search, and we met with the search firm that we have hired and went through some logistics and really some, I think, some important discussion about characteristics and qualifications for the next superintendent. We will discuss, I have given you all some preliminary feedback from the consultants regarding those two issues, and we'll talk about those at the end of the meeting, but just so you're aware of that. Moving on to the strategic discussion, we had talked about possibly talking about early childhood tonight, and as Dr. Frederick and I looked at the agenda and looked ahead and talked to Dr. Ritter about how that discussion might fit in with what's going on in the community, we decided to postpone that until and get that get that topic in the hopper for the rest of the year in terms of our strategic discussions. And I think we'll see, based on the rubric, that that was a popular topic. And I know that the Every Child subcommittees have been meeting, and that work is coming to a head, and I know they're starting to roll that out into the community, and so that will probably be better timing for us to be in the discussion there with the rest of the community than starting too quickly. So that was a decision that Dr. Frederick and I made, but I'm going to turn over the discussion, at least a preliminary discussion, to Dr. Frederick, because she was kind enough to compile all of our information, and then I think she's given you each a draft. And what my intent is for us to look at this and really plan out maybe the next 6 months about what we want to discuss, and then maybe talk about, do we want to have a strategic discussion at our meetings where we just have one meeting that month. You know, sometimes those can get a little long, so we'll talk about logistics after we kind of talk about topics. So go ahead.
Okay. I requested feedback from each board member regarding top 5 topics of high interest for strategic discussions. Although we weren't limited to 5, that's kind of where we started at with listing 5. So from that, each board member submitted their most high interest topics for discussion, and as it worked out, we had several recurring themes throughout the feedback. I'll just kind of give you an overview of what seems to be came forward from that review. Academic achievement of our Title I schools, and as a subset of that, all students that are on free and reduced lunch, so our low socioeconomic students, and their achievement being the number one topic of discussion. And then second would be our choice and innovation programs. And just some of the aspects of that is how are we identifying students, and how's the academic progress of the students that are in those programs, and then if there's an option of providing transportation to make those certainly more choice for all students. And then also early childhood education efforts, that was one of the top 5 topics. And then our long-range facilities planning, and what we can do now in identifying those sites that we believe will be next on the list for needed improvements and repairs, remodeling, and where we might have overcrowding or a lot of students moving into that area. And then also the academic achievement, certainly, of all students, and that's in addition to of our Title I schools, and these would also be in our non-Title schools. What's working, what's not working, what can we replicate that's working. And then a sixth one would be Common Core and how we're implementing Common Core in Springfield. And I think that's our top six, and that should get us from now until June.
Of the year. Is there any discussion from board members if we focused on those particular topics? This is a little bit of the process that we went through with the consultants on Friday to kind of narrow down our focus in terms of qualifications and characteristics of a superintendent. I think Dr. Frederick's done a good job of capturing that. So to sum up, it's really academic progress, or looking at our Title I, or how we serve our most economically challenged students, early childhood, Common Core, and understanding of Common Core and what we're doing in that regard, choice and innovation, facilities, and early childhood. Does that sound? Yeah. Oh.
I just have one thing that I was going to throw on the table that I would like to, be part of the conversation. That is early review of budget and
Yes.
using the strategic discussion
Yes.
for that. We as cabinet are ready to do that, and so I think that needs to be thrown in the works if that's okay. Other than that, I think you pretty much hit every other thing that we were looking
Yes.
at. So.
Well, I guess I had a question about the timing of each one of them, because some of them will impact the budget
Yeah.
potentially as to when we talk about certain.
Right.
I mean, some of it's more data, but some of it will impact potentially funding.
But we wanted to have that. We wanted to have that budget discussion in
Early.
December.
Yes.
Right.
That's right.
So that could take the place of a particular.
I think that will drive a
Topic
lot
here.
of this stuff, by the way. Yeah, so, be interesting.
I guess one of the questions that I would have, and I'm fine with those. I think they're all good topics to explore. A number of these, Title I strikes me as something that everybody was mentioning and wanting to talk about. Is that a number of these are going to require us to get specific information from administration prior to that strategic discussion.
Right.
And so that we're not just discussing things without the data at our fingertips. So we need to make sure that how we space these gives administration time to bring the specific information to us.
Very good point.
Very true.
And I think we'd be looking for some guidance from Dr. Ritter and his administrative team about maybe the most logical sequence in this information. But is everybody agreeable to having that budget discussion but at the December meeting?
Yes.
That in line to what we had talked about? Okay. And then, Dr. Ritter, is there, do you see a sequence here that makes sense?
I like the idea of the title because I think that's a pressing issue, and that's where our greatest need is. So I think we need to look at the achievement around the title. I think we're ready to have that conversation. I also think the Common Core is very, very current, and I think the board needs to know how far along we are with Common Core. I think it's going to help you with decisions related to budget, and so I think that sequence: budget, Title I, Common Core. I think if we could start there, I think that'd be the way to go. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are, but
Bush?
I would defer to the administration to set that agenda. I don't think that we can sit here and negotiate back and forth which date. I think they know better when things need to be done.
Sure.
So it's fine
Know
with
the
me
topics,
just to
as long as
please.
we do.
aware of the topics. And then in terms of
Kathy getting those.
in terms of the lead time in getting information, so that we have enough time to process what's people's preference there. At least a week.
You mean to us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think more than a week we get it lost.
So a Monday before the Tuesday, in other words, like 7 or 8 days.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, we could have a meeting as a cabinet and look at the data, and then we could send it off.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is that
that's what I'd
agreeable with
like.
everybody? Does that give you enough time?
That's great.
And then in terms of the specific data points that we'd be looking for, would that, is that something that would be best served, maybe send an email to Denise and Denise collecting and sending on, or?
Yeah, I mean, if there's specifics within these areas, I think that
would help.
If you'd be willing to do that.
CC me in that process so we can have a conversation, sure.
Okay, so we've set the topics, we've set the kind of some parameters around how that information will come to us. The administration's going to decide on the sequence, but we will start next month with a discussion around budget.
So to
Next
start,
month or December. This is November.
Yeah, next month. We only have the strategic. Yeah, I know.
it's November.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, so just to clarify, to set precedent, maybe to kind of start the routine. So we need to get budget information, whatever it is, to you the Monday before, so that you have it for the strategic discussion.
That would be that first Monday in
process
December.
or whatever it is. Okay, all right.
And that's simply a preliminary discussion of where we're going.
Yes.
We're not going to make any final decisions.
No.
I just want to be clear that we're just preliminary.
for the board to start to give some direction to
That's
the
exactly what we're
administration in
looking
terms
for.
of where our priorities might
Just
be.
wanted to make sure.
That's exactly what we're looking for. So.
Okay, in terms of that discussion, are there particular data points or particular information that board members know right now that would be helpful in that discussion?
But what I might do there, like I was saying, we get that information to you on that Monday, then you can ask for the data to respond to that.
Okay.
I think that might be the best to do.
Okay.
That's okay.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for getting feedback back to Dr. Frederick, and thank you, Dr. Frederick, for compiling that for us. And I thought it was pretty interesting that there were a lot of commonalities. So,
we met before, if I may say so, Ms. Bush and Mr. Leah, to talk about the board's OSR, and so we're going to need to keep track of the amount of conversation around achievement, which is going to be exciting. And so we're trying to figure out how we're going to do that. So keep that in the back of your mind too. But this will be a major step up from where we were. So compliment you guys.
Any other input on where we're going with our strategic discussions? Okay, great. Mrs. Luton, are there any public comments for agenda items? Okay. Moving on, we'll go to information item. Dr. Ritter.
Yeah, now this net zero is going to be an interesting conversation, and that's what we're looking at. We're going to be looking for some support one way or the other from the board. So I'm going to ask you to pay attention really close.
What is new?
Yeah, this is really important. So go ahead, sir.
As if we don't.
As if
Yeah.
you don't. I was with students for 2 days, so sorry about that.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Ritter. It is my pleasure this evening to bring this item to you as we talk about net zero going forward. This evening with me, we have several guests, our consultants that have been working on this study for us. We have Jim Stuffelbeam and Lisa Drew Alton from SAP Designs and Rod Finkel from MFEC Engineering. And they were the ones that did the study for us. We had requested this study as we looked at our new Sherwood facility to make a determination as to the feasibility of doing either a net zero capable or a net zero facility. This study is based off of a model. So it's a model of a 65,000 square foot facility. The actual facility that we are planning has not been completely designed at this point, so we don't have our exact square footage. So just to remember that some things are, that this study is actually just based off of that 65,000 square foot model. I'm going to ask the consultants to come up and do a review of the study for us. there's a lot of information here. So as we go through it, if it's possible to kind of keep the questions to the end, we can pull slides back up as you need to, so we can get through this, and then we'll have some discussion at the end to get some direction as to how we move forward.
Good evening, and we appreciate the opportunity to bring you this report. As Scott said, there is a lot of information, but we'll try to do it as quickly as we can and give you the highlights at least. And that's probably why they chose the architect to give this part of the presentation. We tend to be generalists and conceptualize, but we have our engineer with us in case we need to get into decimal points and the .00 somethings, so we can get down in the weeds if we need to. But our intent is to try to stay above the weeds, but below the treetops, give you enough information that you can get your head around what this study really is trying to show you, and then ultimately, as Scott indicated, some direction, some guidance on whether you want to go forward with this approach to a net zero building, or exactly where you want to fit in with that. There are some in-between measures, and we'll explain those shortly. First, just to give you some general parameters or guidelines for the information. Of course, the purpose is to see if Sherwood can be a net zero building, and the answer is yes, it can be. The key word is reasonably, and that's what you all as a district have to figure out, whether reasonable. That applies to costs, initial costs, long term, and a whole host of factors. That's the tricky part, and that's what we're hoping to give you enough information to deal with. When you start talking about a net zero building, the first step is to get a high performance building, and that would get you down into a range that's above average. Certainly, it could be in the range of a LEED building, for example. You've got some LEED buildings in the district. But a very high efficiency building before you can even begin to get into the potential for net zero. The goal to get to a net zero capable building even is a 30 EUI or less. And that EUI is an energy use intensity index. This is an index or a scale that's been developed by scientists and engineers and Department of Energy in a consortium where they established a rating system for buildings to see how well they use energy, how much energy they use. It's based on a scale of 100, which if you can see the chart here, it's upper third. There's a 100 there that's bold. That 100 is a typical average run-of-the-mill type building that ASHRAE and other associations have established as a sort of a benchmark. The national average for buildings around the country is around 93, and that number applies to thousands of BTUs per square foot per year. BTUs, measurement of energy. So a building that's 93, really by our standards and the buildings that we do and building codes, is really above average, below average, very poor user of energy actually. National school average for schools around the country is 73 kilobTUs per square foot per year. And if you look on down the chart, you can see there's, well, let me go to the next slide. That'll help us. Here we go. Your buildings, on average, the district's buildings, are right in there with national average, about 71 to 74. I think your actual school buildings would come in around 71, if I understand it. And then you go a little further down the scale. ASHRAE 2010 standards and building codes are indicating that buildings need to be at least 50% below that 100, which would put them at an EUI of 50. You go below that, you look in that red outlined zone, that's the zone you need to get into before you can really start talking about a net zero building. That's because at that level, 30 or less, it begins to make sense to buy or install renewable energy sources like PV panels. And generally, at least all the net zero buildings in the country so far have used PV or photovoltaic panels, solar panels, as the means of getting that, because it's much more efficient than, say, wind power and other methods. So you've got to get into that 30 before you can get enough reasonable panels to get it down to zero. A couple of other things to keep in mind, that all the values that we're going to show you today are preliminary. Cost numbers especially. The cost numbers are for purposes of comparison and not necessarily hard estimates on what that component might actually cost, since we don't have the building completely designed yet. Based on some hypothetical and theoretical models that are based on actual history. And if you have questions about that, Rod can get into that more if necessary. And something else to keep in mind, the systems we're talking about for like geothermal, lighting, and so forth, all of those are commercial systems. Is it intended for commercial buildings, not what you'd find in residential markets. You may have read or articles or heard people talk about what their geothermal system did or what solar panels did on their house. This is a completely different world in the commercial market. You're talking about buildings that are 60, 70, 80,000 or even 100,000 square foot. So it's a much larger scale, much more complex systems. And as Scott indicated, the studies are based on a 65,000 square foot building, but the actual design may vary once that is complete. The baseline building, I'm going to let Lisa Drew Alton help me with some of this. She's going to describe some of the components of the models that Malone, Finkel, Eckhart, and Collins have used through their computer. And by the way, we'll have a final report prepared that's a booklet about that thick, full of charts and spreadsheets. Put you to sleep in a minute, but that would be available. So we're just skimming across the surface of that to try to give you the big picture. Go ahead, Lisa.
I thought that was pretty exciting reading, actually, but that's me. What we did is we selected a baseline building to start with. We needed a starting point. So we made a whole lot of assumptions about the fact that it would be Green Globe compliant, that it is above average building envelope and systems, that we're going to use an R30 roof, R33 walls. These are fairly easy to achieve baseline statistics. And we discovered that after we did all of these things and placed these in the models, our EUI was 37, not too bad. And then what we're trying to do is, if you look at the bottom line, that's $78,000 a year. What we're trying to do is reduce that number, which is your annual energy cost. The intention is to get that to zero. On, want to go ahead? Yeah, okay. So on the high performance building model, what we did is we realized that we needed to look at the schedule of your building, because this particular schedule is going to be a little bit different. You've got some components of use in the building that are different. We talked about laptops instead of desktop. Now, this is all information that's been given to us historically from the guys who've done it. We want kitchen power to be reduced. There's some elements of the way you're going to deliver food service that have got to change. Lighting and power was drastically reduced, and we also have to ask our people to modify their behaviors in things. Can't have refrigerators in the classroom, and some of that kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Space heaters.
So our first model that we did, where we really kind of bumped things up a little bit, we replaced your typical HVAC system with a high-performance geothermal system, and these are deep wells. If you have questions about that, Rod can explain it to you. That got us an EUI of between 22 and 25, just that one component alone. The cost ended up adding $16 to $17 a square foot. We'll have this summarized at the end so that you can see it. About $1.2 million to the baseline cost of the building, or about 10%. And then we were able to reduce the energy costs further down to $67,000 a year with Model 1. Then we went to a Model 2, and we further reduced lighting loads, plug loads, power consumption by about 50% to approximately a half a watt a square foot. And that's great energy use. And that got us to an EUI of between 19 and 22 if you add it to Model 1. So I'm accumulating statistics as we go. And that reduced the energy costs further to $61,000. And you had an added cost of $4.10 per square foot, or about $270K to the budget.
And something to add to give you some idea where these buildings fall in, these would be definitely LEED certified, probably even gold at that level. Certainly Green Globes compliant, but these would be very efficient buildings. High performance is the term typically used.
The third and final model was a model that involved changing the building envelope of the building to have more mass. Our typical wall section would be replacing a 6-inch metal stud and batt insulation with a 12-inch heavy density concrete block on all the perimeter walls. And then we would put 6 inches of lightweight insulating concrete on the roof deck. What this did was drop the EUI down to 16.5 to 19 if you cumulatively added this to 1 and 2. It has a price tag of about $650,000, and we further reduced the costs down to $50. I mean, $50,000. It'd be nice at 50 a year, and this particular issue of adding mass to the problem, to the envelope, actually helped affect your utility costs and your demand loads the most.
So if I go back, you dropped from 61,000 per year to 50,000 per year in cost, and that's because the mass levels out the peaks and the valleys of heating and cooling of the building, lowers that. The utility rates are based on peak loads or demand. That's what sets it. So if you can lower that, but you see, at a cost of $650,000, this appears to be less efficient than Model 2, where you're spending $270,000 to lower that EUI by 3 points, whereas here $650,000 to lower it by 2.5, but it has a bigger impact on that monthly utility rate. However, compared to geothermal, this doesn't have the impact that one item does, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in all three of these models combined, we got the lowest EUI of 16.5 at best. The combined cost impact is about $31 a square foot, or $2.1 million. Only Model 1 really achieves getting things down to the EUI of 30 and below. And at the end of the day, all three of these models still don't get you to net zero, because you've now got to complement that with a renewable source, PV power, in order to get your power down to zero. And that involves a large array of PV panels.
The little picture on this slide gives you some idea of the potential scale of that. This is probably similar to what Sherwood would require, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30,000 square feet of panels. That could vary a lot. There's a wide range of cost and types of panels and efficiency and watts per square foot that they can produce and how you mount them. In this particular little photo, this is over a parking lot. So there's some advantage there in taking away some of that heat island effect from the parking lot. But just a quick summary on the models there. Now we get into getting this down to a true net zero. The calculation that the engineers have used is based on a 30 EUI to zero. Even though we've been talking about models that are at 22 or 19 or even low as 16.5, they're using a 30. How much PV panel it would take to get from 30 to zero as a margin of safety, or margin of error, if you will. You need to over install panels, because the panels can be various levels of efficiency, dust, and as they age, their efficiency goes down, so you need to buy a little more than you need. So for purposes of this calculation, they use 30 EUI, which translates to about 400 to 500 kW per year. And if typical cost is about $3,200 per kW, that would lead to about a $1.3 to $1.6 million cost for enough PV panels to get 30 to zero. That would certainly cover any of those models, particularly the geothermal model at 22. And just for hypothetical purposes, we've put that in here. I pressed Rod on what would it be if we were at 22. And so he reluctantly gave me a number around $1 million. Would be fair. It could be more than that. But using that plus geothermal at 1.2 million, add those two together and you get the 2.2 as a possible low-end approach that would get you into that net zero or zero energy capability. And a couple of notes, the PV panels really need to be on site if at all possible, because the preferred method is to send that power from the panels directly into the building. There may be some constraints on site as to where we put those and how many. We could put them on the roof of the building. As you saw that in that one photograph, that large array is about the size of a parking lot. In fact, it's probably about 3 times the size of the parking lot that's right out here on the west side of the building. So it's a pretty good size area, but those could be split up. They could be off-site, but Rod and his team are still working on exactly what kind of arrangement city utilities would make for buyback. They're not required to buy back or to take power back, so that would have to be something that would have to be worked out with city utilities. And if they don't want it, then we would certainly want the panels closer to the site. If they would buy back a certain amount of power, you could have a half acre of panels on another site and just put it back on the grid in order to balance the energy that Sherwood would be using. So that's the PV. Now, a couple of words about payback, which is a difficult thing to calculate and a very imprecise exercise. For a high-performance building, not net zero yet, using models 1 and 2, if those electric costs are reduced down to, say, 16,000 or so, 17,000 per year savings, divide that into the cost of models 1 and 2, which is geothermal plus lighting and plug load reduction, about 1.47 million, you get a payback that's 86 years, and that's not, a reasonable, in most circles, a reasonable payback. It really doesn't factor into the decision. The net zero building looks a little bit better because you can lower those energy costs a little bit more efficiently with the PV panels sometimes than you can with various types of hardware. But that calculation reduces that 78,000 per year projected energy cost to zero. Dividing that into the cost of the panels and the geothermal and the lighting and plug load reduction equipment and so forth, you get a payback of about 36 to 40. It's getting better. But something to keep in mind is the life of these panels is only 25 to 30 years. So even with paybacks in that range, you're starting to replace panels. So it really doesn't become a key factor in the decision making. We know that there will be increases in utility rates in coming years. That's a little hard to predict, but let's just say hypothetically it doubles in 25 years. That does improve that payback to somewhere in that 20-25 range. So it looks a little better then. But again, that's about the life of the panels. Concluding then, the key decision that we need from the district at some point in the near future is whether the district wants to proceed with at least a high performance building to set you up for a net zero capable building. The decision on PV panels could be made at some point down the road, even after the building's constructed, if you so desired, if it's set up for it. But at least to design a building to get it under that 30 would be the first and key decision. And as the decision is made, just keep in mind that payback, as we just showed you, is not a critical component, but certainly it's the philosophy of the district, initial cost, and as a future hedge against increasing energy costs. In summary, to get a true net zero building, you're looking at anywhere from 2.2 to 3.3 million as a premium on top of the basic Sherwood Elementary School that you would ordinarily build, which was the baseline building. And with that, I don't think we did too bad. It was 15 minutes maybe. We're ready to entertain any questions you may have.
And just before, I just want to comment on a couple of things, and we'll get into the questions. As we were looking at those different components, that Model 1, where we were looking at that Model 1 and 2 and the payback on that was prior to factoring in any increases, which you saw what changed significantly when we looked at the solar component, where you went from that 30, you want to back up a slide for me? Yes, here. when you looked at that 36 to 40 year payback, that was factored on utility rates staying as they sit today. And as then we went back and calculated it basically at using a 3% increase per year, and that's where it dropped those paybacks down into that 20 to 25 year range. So that changed it significantly. We didn't do that on that 86 year payback situation. We've talked a lot about energy reduction here at the district for quite a while, doing our lighting retrofits and some of our energy savings projects, controls, and those types of things. As we talk about net zero, though, there are very few opportunities for us as a district to really do a net zero. And it's only when you build new that you really have that opportunity to go into it. As we look at this Sherwood project and we look at that Model 1 and Model 2 component, is roughly about a $1.5 million adder to the project. But without that in place, we can never achieve that net zero in the future. And as we look at it, as we look at the Sherwood project, within that project we had allotted a $2 million factor for land, because we didn't know at the time where we were going to purchase land. We were fortunate and able to get land at a good rate, and we only spent just under $500,000. So there is $1.5 million within that project there that could, if the board wanted, give us an opportunity to position ourselves to where we could look at doing the solar panels in the future. One of the big things that it's really interesting as you look at the solar panels, and like what CU's doing at this time, they're not actually purchasing the panels themselves. They're using a third party, because a third party actually can get a 30% tax incentive that a governmental entity cannot. And I would say that if this is the direction that we would go, I think what we would be looking at is trying to look at some potential grants that could even help with the geothermal, but then really looking to try to see what we could do with finding some partners to where they could take advantage of that, so that's where they'd get their return on their investment and help reduce that cost to the district, which would then decrease that payback even further.
And before we take questions, can I just kind of back up? This was really initiated the study because of, I think, particularly Mr. Hosmer's interest in the net zero building, right? And then there was, I think, agreement from the rest of us that we'd at least like to know the information. So I think it's just helpful to have some background of where we are today and why we're here. So I appreciate the information. Are there questions?
First of all, when do you need an answer?
Well, we're at the point in the design now where we need some direction, a general consensus of the board if we're going to go this direction. Because as we look at our timeline and putting the project out to bid, after the first of the year, in spring, we really need to have that direction now so that as we finalize the layout of the building, Mr. Finkel can actually start putting the mechanical systems in and finish the design.
And I know there may be some choices about just the design of the building itself, and are we going to go into the new design with collaborative learning spaces? So we may be having choices about even just the building itself and how we do that.
Well, we have that in any of our design projects as
Okay.
we go through that. This is kind of separate from that. As we work through our programming of space and those things.
I guess I'm worried that we go, yeah, we want to do this, and then because the money that's going here, we can't do the additional spaces when we're looking at collaborative spaces, more square footage. I guess I'm concerned if we spend money here, can we do that? Can we do both? My choice would be to do both of those.
Okay.
But,
well, the construction budget of the project for the school itself is set at $12 million. So that, as we look at our square footage and we look at the programming of the spaces, that is where we're targeting as to our decisions on how we use that space. This, what I was referring to is the land was a separate line item within that project, but I'm not going to tell the board how to spend that.
Jerry.
The question with respect to, based on what you said, the baseline model gets us down to 37 with just doing some of those basic things, which is pretty darn good. And your number was 74, which is our district average. Are we better off spending that $3-point-some million to get that 74 down with the other buildings that we have? And I'm not sure that touches anything. I don't know. But so what I'm saying is, you know, if we build a basic building here, if we get it down to 37 for this building, we've got, and that 74 is an average, which means we got buildings at 90 or 100 or something to that effect. Do we get a bigger bang for the buck for those dollars if we address those 90, 80s, 100 EUIs with that kind of money? I mean, where do we get the biggest? I'm sure you're going to have an exact answer for that, Ron. Yeah.
No, I think it's going to go back to you're hedging your bet on utilities.
You come to the mic, please.
You're hedging your bet on utilities is really what you're doing. So if you come back and say that they're going to double, then it becomes realistic. Your payback becomes realistic. The thing you have to keep in mind is that we used the highest cost possible out there for this. In other words, we assumed no rebates, we assumed no tax incentives, we assumed no partnering, we assumed nothing. So if I understand you, if I'm going to spend $3 million, is that going to be beneficial for me to do that? And that's where the guesswork comes in with regard to utilities. If you assume they're going to double, then yes, you get it back to a realistic payback.
Well, and I mean, I'm really intrigued about the net zero building, but my thought was, just with the basic building, we get it down to 37, rather than add $3.1 million to Sherwood. Could we spend $3.1 million to get other schools that are at 80,
More energy
90,
efficient.
more energy efficient, and get a bigger cost savings to do that? That's a theoretical. I mean, I'm sure you got an exact answer, Rod, and you've already
That's
done
going to
it.
be really tough
Okay.
to do that in
Okay.
other buildings because your costs are going to be a lot higher to do
Okay.
that.
That's what I want to hear.
They might even double in some cases.
Dr. Prater?
Is the on the PV panels, are you basing that on our latitude and our weather patterns here? Is that, can you be pretty specific on those?
No.
Yeah.
That's the varying point.
Yeah.
Because that's why the site becomes so critical. Are there trees in the way? You know, where are we going to be positioning them on the site? This is an
South
average.
Florida versus.
No, it's in the middle U.S.
Yeah, so we're pretty good there, and you know our general weather patterns
Yes.
here. So, and that applies in this model.
Yes, it does.
And then talk a little bit about maintenance. The only extra maintenance cost is going to be on geothermal. Have those maintenance costs been higher, lower than standard HVAC?
They've been a little higher.
We're in my house, I know.
But however, I need to clarify that because if you'll notice at the very beginning of this, we said a high-performance geothermal system. That's a little bit different than the normal geothermal system that you're seeing out here. It's deeper wells, it's colder water. Yes, there's a little bit more maintenance with it just because it has more mechanical items in it. It's got water, it's got pumps, it's got various other equipment. So the maintenance on it's a little bit higher. Probably, I think they're averaging for the system, for the 37 EUI, that one might be $1.37 for maintenance. This may go to $1.54, $1.45.
So not a doubling.
It's not double, no.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Hosmer?
One thing that intrigues me with the numbers is that the idea of having a third party come in and take that tax credit, which takes $400,000 off of that cost conceivably. The other thing that you know, we know in the next 3 years we're going to have 13% higher energy. That's already been voted on. Rates are going up. So in 2010 we had an 18% or 17% increase in rates. So the idea that we're hedging against future increases, which personally I believe 3% is a extremely conservative figure. But the other thing that intrigues me is that we talk about payback, and if you pull out that $400,000 with a third party doing it, and you get grants, if you can access some grants, then and energy rates are higher than 3% a year, then your payback, you're maybe looking 6, 7, 8 years payback. But the other thing that I think is important to consider from a board perspective is the money that we spend, the energy costs that we offset in year one are in our operating budget. So the $78,000 that we offset in year one can be used immediately in our operating budget, because that is energy costs that are offset. And those energy costs are going to be offset each and every year as a result of this investment. And I think that is something that intrigues me as well. I also think that having a net zero school is something that we talk about wanting to be known for things, and we are known for a lot of things. And boy, this would be another one that we'd be known for, because it's a wonderful way, again, to teach students, and it's a wonderful way to set yourself apart as a school district. So I'm certainly all in for pursuing this and seeing whether we can get grants and partner and do some of these other things. But I really like the idea of being able to have $78,000 in year one to spend on kids and teachers.
Anybody else that hasn't had a chance to? Yeah, he's talked already. I just want to see Bruce.
I just think the important part to me was, if we're going to do this, we need to do it at the beginning. And there are parts that we could add and make some of those decisions later on, but if we don't do certain things at the beginning, we don't have that option. So to me, that was numbers. I know you've got balls up in the air trying to figure that out exactly, but to me, the most important thing is, if we don't do certain things now, we have none of the opportunities later on. So to me, that for me to focus on what we have to do now, to have that possibility is the important part.
Jerry?
Are there any net zero building? What's the nearest net zero building to here?
I don't know if I would go to necessarily the newest or the closest, maybe the newest, because they've evolved, they've learned as they've gone down. The one in Kentucky is probably the one I would recommend, Richardsonville. It's elementary school, and they were trying for a 20 and got an 18, and so they actually got a check back at the end.
That's
of
the nearest school. Are there any other buildings?
There's other buildings. There's about 33 total. Do you know the closest?
There's the Tyson Learning Center, which is out by the Shaw Arboretum Gardens, just south of St. Louis. But I will say that based upon the two studies that we read on it, that the available case studies to look at right now and today are typically small, lightly used buildings. So the Richardsville in Kentucky, and the Lady Bird Johnson Middle School down in Irving, Texas, are the two best examples of schools same size and exactly what they did. We don't have a close school. The closest to net zero is the one up in Tyson.
Anybody else have any questions? I guess my concern is that it would have been nice to have this discussion pre-bond and to have this as part of our discussion with our community. I think we've made a lot of strides in our new construction over the past few years to be as energy efficient and as aware of those needs as possible. I also think we're not really in a great position to be the guinea pigs in terms of what this reflects in our community. I mean, this is public money. So I think, I guess, personally, as we maybe move this discussion from questions to giving you all some guidance, I guess I would be less interested in committing the full amount of resources to get to the net zero, and would be more supportive of, do I understand that first line, the 37, is that having the building prepared to be net zero, or would we have to go down to the geothermal model?
37 is our baseline. That's what we're designing the building within our standard construction budget as we sit today.
But it would not be ready.
For June. We would not be able to be a net zero in the future.
Okay.
We would need to pick up Model 1 and probably Model 2.
For an addition, can you just very
And that would
quickly, for an
basically
additional,
be roughly $1.5 million.
$1.5 million.
And that would put us in a position where we would in the future be able to go for partner and do something.
And we have that money within the Sherwood budget
Yes.
based on the land and the project. Okay.
Yes.
How do people feel about, Dr. Prater?
I think I'm agreeing with you exactly. We know we've got some money in the budget through some cost savings in other places. Our taxpayers know that, we're very good about trying to stick to our budgets. If we find more resources later on, if you all explore and get some grants and some partnerships to add the PV panels on, as long as we have the building ready for that, then I don't think anybody in this community would look askew at it, especially when you look at Andy's, when he pointed out very well about being able to add to operating costs immediately. So I'd certainly say go with the preparation
Can we
for it.
motion? I think we just need a
Just
general guidance.
You're talking the 1 and 2. That's what he's asking for.
Right.
the one.
Yeah.
One and two, yeah.
Yeah.
Getting ready for it.
Everybody's
Having it ready.
thumbs up, it looks like.
I guess just from a technical perspective, would that come back to us in a motion then? So at some point in time, we are approving the expenditure of that particular amount of money? I think that would be important.
That would actually come back in the bid with the construction bids, because what happens at this point is this then goes into the design.
Yeah, and that's what
then
we're
the
here
design is
discussing,
bid.
about giving you all the permission or the guidance to go ahead with the design.
And if there were a way, sorry to interrupt,
That's all right.
if there were a way then, as the construction bids came back, is it way difficult then to add in Model 3 options?
Yes.
We give you different options.
Yeah, because that's dealing with the mass of the building.
yeah.
That changes the
Okay.
design.
Okay, I
Yes.
thought so.
I guess the other thing I'm interested in is fairly, maybe it comes back with the bid, or at some point really knowing how reasonable it is for us to expect to be able to get grants or partnerships, or how that piece might work for us. And maybe that's for future boards to talk about. But I also think that it's our responsibility to try to do this as financially responsible as possible. So
The other important thing, and I know it was talked about in the presentation, but it does talk about how we use that facility, because we can design it and we can invest in it here, but unless, as the board and administration makes that commitment to how we're going to operate that building and our behavior, we will fall
But does
short.
this also, that's the building we're talking about partnering with the Boys and Girls Club on. Does that also include that additional usage to 8 or 9 o'clock at night and on the
We've
weekends?
factored that in, but then that's
Okay.
also worked out through that lease with them to cover costs as well.
Any other questions? Mrs. Bush?
The added mass to the building, will that make that more tornado resistant? I mean, is there some way you can kind of make that a shelter
As a
too?
layman, I would speculate it would be safer, but I would defer to the engineer.
Part
He's
of
not
it's
a
the roof
structural
flying
engineer,
off,
but
but-
if you,
Somewhat. It certainly makes the building more resistant to high wind, but I wouldn't put it in the category of a FEMA shelter, certainly.
Well,
But,
because the roof isn't
yeah, when you
connected
have
properly.
block walls,
probably.
obviously that's more resistant to missiles and so forth, but you still have the windows and everything else that get blown out. So
Gotcha.
it would
Okay.
have some degree of hardening, but I certainly wouldn't count on it as a shelter.
But we're not talking about Model 3 in giving direction. We're giving.
No, I just-
I
I
just
was
want to
ask-
make sure.
Yeah, I was just asking if that
and
would
we-
be worth
Right.
adding.
We
I just
still
wanna make sure we're all
are,
on the
in
same
this
page.
project, going to be bidding a safe room as an alternate, depending on how that grant for the Kickapoo project comes through. So that's all still part of this. So, I mean, that's separate from what we're talking about here tonight.
Okay.
Based on what I'm hearing, then basically move forward, and there might be some addendums if we find maybe there's some savings that we can bring back with the bid. So we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thanks.
Very interesting. Now, is there going to be a financial gain to you if we have a net zero?
We'll buy him dinner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to action items for separate consideration, Area 5. Dr. Ritter.
At this time, we'd like to have a conversation with you regarding work that has been done on policy IKF. And remember now we're aligning this policy with Missouri School Board Association policies. The reason we have to come forward at this time is that basically we were going to bring it along with other policies, but this one is a priority because of needs related to graduation. So at this point, Dr. Harrell.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Ritter. And yes, you're correct. The issue at hand is to be able to get the changes to IKF into New Horizons prior to the scheduling process starting for our high schools, which comes up in December, January. So we just need to try to get this piece in. Now, the IKF that we're looking at this point, Ms. Kathy, I'm sorry, how do I go to the... The MSBA policy for IKF is quite a bit different than our current policy. And some of the components in the MSBA policy are still being vetted, and the references and connections to the MSBA policy would match the other I policies. So this IKF is our current IKF. We're making these adjustments at this time, again, to get it into New Horizons so that the standards and expectations are the same. The other piece this evening that I'll be sharing with you is kind of a review of work that has been ongoing and that is still going on in dealing with our graduation requirements and expectations, and really some exciting stuff that I think is happening there, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you. When you look at the IKF policy, the reason for the item, though, the main changes that you will see there will be in the area of e-learning, and the addition of 3 credits that would be allowed from an e-learning or a correspondence level course, with the preference being on e-learning itself throughout the career of a high school student. You'll see no changes to the total number of credits, and you'll see a still allowing for college preparatory certificate, but we've removed the initial lines from the college preparatory because the state no longer really supports that particular certificate. That's something that the student can earn and we can gather for them. It doesn't come from the state anymore. And really our graduation requirements are as strong, if not stronger, than the college prep certificate requirements. So that's where that piece is as far as the IKF action item. When we look at graduation requirements and college and career readiness refers to the level of preparation that a student needs to achieve in order to enroll and successfully, without remediation, successfully enroll in a credit-bearing post-secondary institution that offers a baccalaureate degree or could transfer into a baccalaureate degree, or that offers a high level of certification or certificate program in order to enter a strong career pathway and advance during their life. So that's kind of the ongoing definition that we use for college and career readiness. The other piece that we're going to look at are kind of 4 components of the puzzle when looking at college and career readiness, including the current Missouri learning standards, the Smarter Balanced Assessment that is coming down the road for us, the Missouri School Improvement Program, or MSEP 5, and then our base graduation requirements. Everything that we work on through Springfield Public Schools and when referring to the Missouri Learning Standards are going to be circled around the Springfield Public Schools learning model. At the center of that is our relevant and rigorous curriculum, and the Missouri Learning Standards are the foundation for that curricular piece. Obviously, you've heard conversations around the 3 C's and our processes involving feedback, high expectations, success, and relationships. The Missouri Learning Standards, working through the learning model, require 2 major components. One is strong curricular development, and that's curriculum that's developed with the 3 C's in mind and a focus on literacy. Problem-based learning may be an approach that we use, inquiry-based learning is an approach that we use, and then the development of cross-curricular course development. With the instructional practices, we look at incorporating these 21st century skills throughout, circled around high expectations, critical thinking, communication and presentation skills, problem solving, and then a focus on knowledge synthesis and application. The college and career component of MSEP 5 falls into 2 of the 6 categories, being Category 3, which is college and career ready, and Category 5, the graduation rate. What you have here are the results from the 2012 and 2013 MSEP 5 district results for Springfield Public Schools. So Category 3 reviews things such as ACT and SAT, Compass or ASVAB, as well as AP test, IB test, dual credit, dual enrollment, and then the educational training. As you've seen, we scored a 21 out of 30 in that area in 2012 and a 23.5 out of 30 in 2013. And then the graduation rate, we've been very strong in that, scoring a 30 out of 30 both years.
I'm sorry, can you go
Yes.
back? Where did we fall short again on
Where did we
those?
lose our points? So
Is that what you
where
have?
did we lose our
Yeah.
points? Yeah.
Some of our points are lost in the number of students taking ACT, SAT, the Compass or the ASVAB. It's not only measured on the performance of the students, but the number of students. And so we have processes in place at this point to increase the number of students at each high school taking those particular assessments. Another area that we do lose points is in the post-secondary educational training, because it's difficult for us and for all districts in the state to have good results back on the postgraduate follow-up survey. That's a year after graduation. Oftentimes it's difficult for us to track those students down. So again, that's an area where we're trying to increase input back on the graduation survey and then increase the number of students who are taking these assessments and or taking AP or IB assessments as well.
What's ASVAB?
The ASVAB is I don't have the definition per word, Ms. Callan, but it's the military exam.
And don't we give Compass to every student? Doesn't every student take Compass?
No, we do not.
So what is Compass? When is Compass given?
Compass is a test that actually with Dr. Pomperine a couple of years ago worked with OTC as we started. That's the test that they use for measuring their college readiness, and so we were able to access that to some extent. It can be a very good diagnostic tool, but it's very time consuming to take it to the full diagnostic version.
Well, I will tell you, I think we do need to work with our partners at OTC, because we have so many students taking advantage of the A+ program, and because they do not need the ACT to get into OTC, all these
right.
Acronyms, I think that that's a real issue that may be an unexpected consequence of sending so many students
Absolutely.
to OTC to take advantage of the A+ program. So I think that that's something that we need to work with them to figure out, to encourage students still to take that test, even though they know they're going to
Right.
go on to OTC.
Questions?
Is there a cost to I know at one time there was a cost to the student for the ACT, the SAT. Is those still at cost, personal cost to the students?
There is. However, once annually, a student who qualifies for free or reduced lunches can receive the ACT without cost, once annually. Also, with the MSEP 5 piece, we look at our P to G efforts. They continue to produce very good results. We've seen a strong increase in our graduation rate. Our dropout reduction efforts continue to stay stable and solid. We're up slightly this year at 2.7%. We were at 2.3% last year. Cross-divisional efforts continue to pay dividends with the transitional conversations from elementary to middle and middle to high, and our feeder programs continue to pay dividends with that relationship building. An increased focus on the pre-K efforts, I think, is a critical next step, which already are in place. You know of many of those community-wide, as well as enhancing our partnerships with our colleges and universities in the area, and so that we end up with more of a pre-K 16 approach as opposed to the K-12 we're used to for years and years. Our graduation rate for 2013 was 86.5% on the 4-year rate and 88.7% on the 5 years, so very strong numbers there. And then our final dropout number was 189 students, which is 189 too many, but it is 2.7%, and again has been strong results over the last few years. So as we looked at those three pieces of the puzzle, the next step was kind of our graduation requirements and then the policy itself of IKF. So beginning in November of last year of 2012, multi-tiered committee approach was presented for the study of IKF. We looked at a steering committee that had 6-member work team here at the district level that worked on the planning, gathering the research, planning the meetings itself, and getting that information out to the larger committee members. We had site-level committees at all 5 of our high schools. Each one of those committees, or the total number of those committees, were 60 plus. However, those committees were then getting feedback from all the other teachers within the building that were willing to give feedback. We also had electronic feedback offered for both those committees and those teachers. So really try to gather as much information as we possibly could throughout the district. And then we had a district level committee made up of 61 members that include students, parents, teachers, counselors, administrative leaders. We had a member of the Board of Education, Dr. Frederick, thank you for your work with that. And we had an associate provost for the College of Education that also sat on that committee. The initial research and data that we reviewed for what we call the IKF committee looked at comparable and local districts in a sense of graduation requirements. The values varied from 24, which is the state minimum, to 30. We require 25. No district required more credits than what we did in the core areas. And most everybody follows the Missouri baseline, which is 4-3-3, which means 4 in English Communication Arts, English Language Arts, 3 Math, 3 Science, 3 Social Studies. The variances were primarily in the area of electives. So when you look at the district, for instance, we had one district that requires 30 credits in order to graduate, where we require 25. We require 7.5 elective credits, and they require 12. So there's your primary difference. We also looked at the graduation requirements for contiguous states, various research articles and briefs on graduation expectations and college readiness. One of the things that we looked at is graduation, or credit acquisition. And so what you have here are the 2011 and 12, and some of these years are going to vary in the presentation because the 11 and 12 year we had complete data. I got 12-13 data when I could, but not all of the data matches up. So this is the most recent we had and what the committee looked at. So the average number of credits received from a graduate from each one of our high schools is listed there, along beside it then with the total number of graduates for that particular class. We also looked at the number of students who graduated. Well, let me back up here. You'll see that the lowest average is 27 credits, so 2 credits higher than what we require. So students, on average, are taking more credits than what we ask of them. So then we want to know, well, how much more and in what areas, if we can possibly determine that. What we're able to determine is that 62% of our students graduate with 28 or more credits. It's really pretty impressive in the long run when we look at the total number of possible credits that can be earned. August to May, with 4 years, we have anywhere from 28 to 32 credits. So for 62% of them to earn more than 28 is, I feel, pretty strong. However, we want to see, are these students choosing on their own to take 4 in the core? And for the most part, no, they are not. 12% did, which is indicating to us that they're taking in areas of interest, which is what we want to see. But are they also taking areas of rigor? And then the total graduates for that particular year is 1652 that was used for these figures.
Why would we not want them to take 4 credits in the 4 core areas?
I don't know that we wouldn't. They're just not.
Okay, I thought you said, this is good because they're. I thought the phrasing. I thought you were indicating that was.
Well, I think that the fact that they're taking 28 credits is good in that they are finding areas of interest. Now, is it good that they're not taking 4 in the core? I don't know. I wasn't saying that was bad, I guess. My point being that they were looking at their following interest area. We also looked at the senior year and the number of open blocks. And you have two numbers here. The first number, the 147, is the average number of students at each of our 5 high schools that have limited schedule, so an open block to some extent. The second number, the 100...
At each school or district-wide?
That's the average number district-wide. The second number you see is the number of seniors who would have it.
All 5 high schools.
That's the average number district-wide, yes. All 5 high schools on average.
Not each high school.
We had some schools that had as low as 70 students and some in the upper 180s, 190s. But the average across the 5 high schools was 147 students.
For each high school, per school.
Per school, yes.
So about 10% of the students
Our students
are taking a full...
have a reduced schedule. That's correct. The second number you're looking at is the number of seniors in that situation. So how many of our seniors on average per high school, which is 116, that take less than a full schedule? There's a lot of reasons why a student might have a smaller...
So it's the majority of... That 147 is majority made up of seniors.
Yes.
Yeah.
116 of the 147 are seniors. But I wanted you to get a look at the whole, that's the 9 through 12 components. I wanted you to see that as well. Or I wanted the committee to see that, and I'm sharing with you information the committee saw. There are a lot of reasons that a student may have a reduced schedule. There could be issues with an IEP or 504 plan. There could be personal reasons, employment needs, child care needs. In some situations, students are able to function for a half a day and do pretty well, but then seem to slide off, especially when they're younger. And so some disciplinary reasons may cause for flexible scheduling. But the area of concern and conversation for this particular committee was what appears to be a lack of engagement and connectedness for our seniors. We also want to look at remediation rates. These rates are very difficult to get a hold of. And the rates that you have are the most common that I can get for all of our different comparables, but I want to be very specific so that you understand what you're looking at here. These are the percentage of students who would have taken remediation in either ELA, English Language Arts, or mathematics at a college or university. But that college or university had to be either a 2-year or 4-year public university and only in the state of Missouri. So any of our students going to private institutions, any of our students leaving state, we don't have those numbers. So this is not a complete picture, but it's a comparable picture when you look at our contiguous districts and when you look at our comparables. So for English Language Arts, for Springfield Public Schools... They're dealing
with the same limitations on numbers, right?
Yes, all these are identical numbers, yes. So when we look at Springfield Public Schools and English Language Arts remediation rate, we're seeing anywhere from 8.1% was our lowest by school, and 22.1 was our highest. So then for our contiguous, 11.5 to 35.7, and for our comparables, 2.2 to 17.8. And then you see the math.
What are the comparables?
Our comparables are our typical ones: North Kansas City, Rockwood, Columbia, and I believe there are 5.
We haven't heard about them in a while. Yeah.
Well, we use the same ones we have been using in the past. Yes.
A good reminder of who they were. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I should have been more explicit.
Rockwood, North Kansas City is.
Hazelwood.
No, we took Hazelwood out.
Hazelwood out.
Okay.
Columbia. I think there are 5, aren't there?
Yeah, there are.
But anyway, I'm sorry, I don't have those memorized here for you. But those were the districts that we looked at.
And the contiguous districts.
And then our contiguous districts, you're correct. Mm-hmm. So the study and discussions. The committee reviewed each specific discipline and broke the IKF into 6 areas and studied each area intensely. We had 8 meetings from November to May 1st of last year, plus multiple meetings in between at the site level and the steering committee level. The consideration in the conversations was around high expectations, the intended and unintended consequences of changing any of our graduation requirements, impact on other curricular areas, specifically on non-core and related arts, and then, of course, the college and career readiness piece. From those discussions, we realize that the numbers may vary, but the base requirements for IKF continue to meet or exceed state, contiguous, and comparable districts. There's an evident deficiency in a percentage of our students who are graduating and needing remediation, and that is an issue and a concern. However, as you've seen from the other data, we're not the only ones with that same issue. This is a problem really across the state. So we must better prepare our students, but does that necessarily mean more requirements? And that's really where the conversation came into place, and how do we better prepare? And an analogy I would like to use, if you'll give me the flexibility to do so, for those of you who have been involved in track, is in the hurdle event. I thought it was a good analogy. So we look at the middle school, the high school, and NCAA collegiate or Olympic qualifying competitive level hurdle event in track and field. For middle school, you have 10 hurdles and you run a 100-meter race. For high school, you have 10 hurdles and you run a 110-meter race. And if you're an Olympian, you have 10 hurdles and you run a 110-meter race. However, at middle school, those hurdles are 8.5 meters apart and they're only 30 inches high. At high school, they're 9.14 meters apart, but they're 39 inches high. And for an Olympian, they're 13.72 meters apart and they're 42 inches high. So the preparation to each hurdle, the distance between the timing and the height of the hurdle, really becomes more of an issue than the number of hurdles. So with that in mind, how then can we better prepare our students? Because obviously there are concerns and issues. We believe the answer is systemic. A rigorous and relevant curriculum, which we discussed with the learning model and the Missouri Learning Standards, with a focus on literacy and 21st century learning skills. Professional learning that allows our teachers to take risk, but have the confidence to take those risks in a controlled environment. The continuation of innovative offerings and approaches to learning and to teaching. Technology integration. Technology is not the answer, but it's a critical tool. Developing a community that has a culture, through the partnerships with that community, of expectation of beyond high school. I think that's a critical piece. It's more than just what we say as a school district. It's what they hear out on the streets, what they hear from mom and dad, what they hear at church, is that the expectation is no longer that you end with high school. It's not an ending point. It's a beginning. And then the maintenance of a pre-K through 16 approach to our P2G efforts. We know we have to add value to the senior year. We're working on a process that hopefully we can do that. We need to improve career planning and support and opportunities for exploring college and motivate students to enroll in additional and rigorous coursework, and then create an environment that challenges all 4 years. So what are our next steps? From the committee, our next steps were the continued strong collaboration with Ed Service and Ed Operations, working curriculum and professional learning with the components of operations to improve that engagement piece and the experience throughout. Continued support of innovation across the system, not only in the programming offerings, which are critical in making a huge impact in our district, but within instructional strategies and approaches. Enhanced support of our current choice opportunities at the high school level and the development of other opportunities, such as the International Baccalaureate Program, the new tech component coming into Glendale High School, Kickapoo U, Junior ROTC at Hillcrest, and Parkview's leadership focus. Some of these are in place, some of these are in preparation. Maximizing opportunities with all of our local colleges and universities. How can we make those ties even deeper than what we have for each of our students? One of the potential next steps and one of the potential ties to the college and university and to the next step we feel may be one of these avenues we feel may be in the creation of a differentiated diploma. And so we currently have a work team that started in October of this year with a steering committee, a steering work team. It's led by Mr. David Schmitz that is looking at the possibilities of a differentiated diploma approach, where the current high school diploma of 25 credits would still be an opportunity for any student. However, students who may be looking for a specific area of interest to create a diploma that's surround around that area that might then enhance them to take a little deeper and more rigorous coursework. And so what that might look like, and this is still again in the planning stages, is obviously a continued focus on 21st century skills, individualized and monitored career plans, and enhanced career guidance. Multi-layered mentorship. We believe this is a critical piece. Mentoring not only that's occurring at the building level, but at the collegiate level and even from the career component. And with that career component, we believe we can reach that through career exploration, job shadowing, practicum opportunities, and even internships for any and all students. We believe an enhanced component of civic expectation and citizenship is critical, along with service learning. And then what may end up being a capstone or some kind of culminating senior activity for those who are choosing to take a differentiated approach. So that is the work that has been currently done with IKF. The reason for the change in IKF is some of those changes that came from that committee. Again, the IKF that you see before you is our current one. It does not match MSBA. The MSBA IKF will come with all the other I policies when that comes to the board. And that's my
There's going to be a lot of feedback and questions. Mrs. Bush.
Well, we were talking about lack of engagement of seniors in that last year. What's the importance of keeping them there and not letting them move on? I know there's been a suggestion from a superintendent in a close by school district that perhaps we ought to get rid of senior year and put that money into pre-K. Yeah.
I don't know that I can philosophically go as deep as that last statement, but I can tell you that when we have students who prepare themselves to be finished even in 3 years, we have processes for that. We have many students who do end at the first semester of their senior year. What I think we're seeing is students, and oftentimes, very well intentioned and well supported and strong students who see an opportunity to get the majority of their credits finished. They may continue to take something that interests them. They may even continue to take something based on the weighted scale that's going to challenge them, but they may not take a full schedule. And it's becoming to some extent, a little bit of a rite of passage, and I think that's part of the issue we need to deal with too.
Is there any data that can show how many of those students that didn't have a full schedule their senior year are needing remediation? Would there be a way to find out that information?
I don't believe I can go down to that individual student, Ms. Callan. I'll look and I'll check. But since we only have the students who would have graduated and then stayed in a 4 or 2 year university in the state, we have to find the names from who they got and then try to measure it back. I just don't know if I can or not, because I'm not sure.
And I think
but I'll
the
look.
other question I have is I'd like to know, is there a difference in engagement based on the type of schedule each of those sites offers? I think we have now 5 different hybrids of a schedule, and do we see, is that an issue in terms of engagement and rigor?
There's been some changes in the scheduling recently to where we're actually quite a bit more similar than what we have been in the past. So we have the 2 4-block systems, which are at Kickapoo and Glendale, and we have an 8-block system, which is very, very similar at Hillcrest. Central is still only offering 7 credits, but part of that is because they have a higher level of minute needed for each of the individual courses with the IB component. And then Parkview currently still only offers 7 credits. And so what we've seen a little bit of a difference is we have fewer students at Parkview who take an open schedule or open block their senior year, but they've also only had the opportunity to earn 21 credits by the end of 3 years. Whereas any of the other places, Hillcrest, Kickapoo, or Glendale, they've had the opportunity to complete 24 credits by the end of their 3rd year, so they're a little bit more ahead. So I think that may be more of a reason why we're seeing that at that particular site, less numbers. Glendale, though, when you look at the 2 4-blocks, has significantly less students who take open blocks than does Kickapoo. I don't know that I could give you a reason one way or the other. Could be.
Mr. Lee?
You answered 2 of my questions real quick, so that was good. This is on the policy itself, IKF, with respect to e-learning.
Okay.
And basically you say student can take 3 credit online to graduate. Up to 3 credits could be taken through an e-learning process.
Without the need for an IPS, yes.
What's that? Without a need for a what?
There'd be the possibility to take more if there were need, but they'd need to complete an IPS, which is an individual program of study that's approved then by the principal.
Okay, so that's a separate issue, though. They could take more than 3.
They could take more than 3, yes.
Okay. And my question was, which I appreciate that. The 3 classes, we basically say, do those have to be Springfield Public School classes, or can they take 3 classes from somebody else, even if SPS offers them.
We are working real hard to create the course that they need, and the expectation would be that they take our course because it's our curriculum taught by our teachers. So if the course is offered from Springfield Public Schools, we would ask they take a Springfield Public Schools course.
But it could be any three classes.
Any of the three that we offer.
It would, or we don't offer.
If we don't offer it, then they'd have to go to correspondence or some other online alternative.
Okay. Just had a senior moment and it went right away. Where'd it go? Because part of my question was, who approves the class? If we take it from somebody else, is that done at the site, or is that done ahead of time? And I've got experience here where one school approved a class and another school didn't approve the exact same class.
That's typically done at the site. We have a couple of vendors that we more frequently use. I know BYU, Brigham Young University, offers a lot of courses. A lot of our students, especially our students in the IB program, take courses through there. So that's the first one that pops up into my mind. But typically that's done site by site. That's not something that's gone over to the district office level.
Can they take a core class online? One of the 4333s?
We currently do not have that in the offering from our e-learning course offerings as far as a full credit piece. We have some, we're working on a world civic, what is it, Ms. Moore? Civic world geography, thank you. My mind was working, which is a half credit class. So that will be a core area that will be available, but that's just right now in the process.
So your answer is no, they can't take a core.
Currently they couldn't from us, and we wouldn't.
Could they take it from somebody else?
We wouldn't recommend that. We'd have them take our course. I could also never say never, because if we have a student who has a health issue or needs some kind of special attention for whatever reason, they may do it, but very seldom at this point.
A couple of questions. I sat in on a Common Core presentation at MSBA, and one of the slides, it was very interesting because it said it had a statistic of high school math teachers whose students were prepared for college in math, 90%. College math teachers whose students were prepared for college math, 20%. And that right there just struck me as maybe that's part of what we're dealing with of, what people are thinking is college and career ready, and whether we need to examine that in a little more detail, because Chris seemed like she was getting that thing of, maybe seniors, not taking a full schedule, but a lot of these kids are in college and they're not ready for college. So these are not the kids that have decided not to go to college. These are the strivers that want to go to college and get into college. So that's something that concerns me a little bit, and I think we need to take a closer look at whether or not whether we can measure it in some way to measure that competency earlier, so that we can address that, as opposed to just assuming that when you graduate from Springfield Public Schools, you're ready to do college level math and English, and if you're not, then why not, I guess, is my question.
And part of what we're currently in process working on right now is using the tools that we have, as well as other tools that we haven't probably used the most, including the Compass piece, to determine that. And I think that through MSEP 5, with trying to increase the number of students taking those major assessments, such as the ACT, SAT, and the ASVAB, we're going to get a better picture. We currently have the Explore and the Plan, which all students take, and we are digging deeper into that particular information, though it is at the end of that session, but it will help guide some of those directions, and it's very good at predicting the performance of the ACT. They're very good at that piece of it. So looking deeper at the Explore, deeper at the Plan, to kind of be more predictive, and then to do a better job of moving kids into the course that they know they need. So we are working on some of that, but I understand what you're saying.
If I can interject too, I think the other thing that's really going to help is as we onboard the Common Core math, we're starting to build that conceptual base much earlier. And so in the selection of our materials and in the professional learning that we're providing teachers, it's too late to start talking about Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Algebra competencies start in kindergarten and 1st grade with really strong number sense. So it's going to take a while for that to work through the pipeline, but that's really at the intent of some of those Common Core approaches paired with strong curriculum, professional learning early on so that you've got that pipeline coming through.
And then the other comment I have about this is that, we talk about that pre-K to 16. I think that is an important concept. And it seems like sometimes with graduation requirements and credits, we get kind of stuck with this idea that the credits determine whether you have a competency, as opposed to focusing on the competency and not the credit.
Absolutely.
There are sophomores in our high schools that are perfectly well suited to be at Drury right now, or at MSU, or at Harvard, and there are graduates that are not prepared to go to Podunk University, but we bringing in flexibility and the ability for kids to kind of chart that and move when they're ready. And you talked about the senior year not spending that money elsewhere, but being able to go from looking at credits and core to competency. That
right.
if you've mastered it, then you move on and you're ready, and you're not so concerned about where you get it, how you get it, who you get it from, but that you know it, and so that you're ready for whatever that next step
Then you
is.
also have emotional maturity.
A couple of pieces to address that a little bit more even that we're working on at this point across the high school levels and the middle school levels and throughout all three divisions, but specifically that hard look at literacy and incorporating literacy, because the research that we are seeing at this point over the last 2 or 3 years shows that rich literacy, specifically written literacy, is increasing scores across the board. So that score in math will go up based on the improvement that child has with writing ability specifically, and certainly with writing and reading. Also, with the incorporation of the new approach with our math at the high school level as far as expectations, Algebra 1, and then there's that Pre-Algebra Foundations course. Those two courses have been very critical, and every student will take them. So a little different approach we've had in recent years. And that Foundations and Support course has just been a real critical piece to what's going on. We're already starting to see, I believe, the needle move in a couple of sites that have incorporated that deeply and are using what's also called the ALEC program to support that. So I absolutely agree with you. We're also reviewing at this time at our middle school level the concept behind competency-based grading or standards-based grading, where we can look at here are some rigorous components that have to be met, and here's how those meeting those components convert to a letter grade, because we still have parents who need to see that letter grade. But that's really the area where we need to be moving. And so we are having some investigations there that at some point, Mr. Hosmer, I hope moves up into the high school, because I think you're exactly right.
Any other comments from other board members?
A couple
Dr.
things.
Frederick?
On your bullet on individualized monitored career plan and enhanced career guidance, I mean, having spent a number of years in high school and working with high school students, I know that this idea of their career and their career plan, even when they come to high school, starts in middle school.
Right.
I mean, that's when they get the guidance as to you need to take these classes, and they need to be college prep classes, and in addition to your interest area. So are our new middle school CSIs are they responsible for some of this enhanced career guidance or career planning? I mean, I'm not sure. We haven't had an updated report on what they're doing, but do they have a responsibility to provide that extra piece at the middle school?
Well, this particular thing that you're seeing here, of course, is the pre-laid pieces of what a differentiated diploma may look like. And so I couldn't say anybody's been assigned to those particular areas yet, because that's still kind of in the development piece. I will tell you that our counselors, there's no way in the world they can do it at the level it needs to be done. And much like the literacy piece, this has to be an all-hands-on-deck approach. And so I will answer that question with, at this point, no. However, do I think the CSIs will play a role in that in the future? Yes, I do. And I think every teacher will have to play a role in that in the future, because we're not going to be able, when you're talking about a graduating class at Kickapoo High School of 440 kids, plus the other 1,200 that are down below them in the other three grades, 4 or 5 counselors cannot monitor them to the level it needs to be. And so it will enhance and expand, I think, as we start moving this direction. And really with Kickapoo U, you're already seeing that.
Well, and one other last comment I want to make about the senior year experience, and that's very critical for students to have that senior year experience. But one thing that I was around whenever we went to the 4-block at Kickapoo High School, which gave students an opportunity to take 32 credits. And that was one of the things that was of concern at that time, was students could graduate at the end of their junior year. But what came in shortly after that was the opportunity for students to do dual enrollment. And I think that's another piece that we don't want to lose sight of, that our students can graduate staying in our high schools 4 years with, 26 credits, college credits? I mean, I know I had students leaving, graduating from high school and moving on to a university as a second semester sophomore because they were able to pick up those credits.
As a principal, I've had students leave with over 30. And so it's like anything else. If they want to focus on it, there's a lot of opportunity.
They can stay their 4 years, and it's also the tuition's at a reduced rate.
A reduced rate,
They can
it's incredible
continue to
savings.
participate in their school activities and athletics. So we have a lot to offer our students, I think, that senior year.
And we're looking at new concepts too. You know, we really haven't, the integrated credit, where we have one credit from a course integrated with another credit. We have not really explored that in a district. We've explored it some. We don't really have that component. But that's another piece that's even more powerful. So as we start looking at some of these skills, how can we incorporate one coursework into another coursework? It's just ways to add to that flexibility, add to that engagement piece, and make that senior year more valuable. So absolutely.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Lee, did you remember your other question, sir? I'm sorry.
Oh, it came to him while he
Okay.
was.
Well, I didn't mean to. I just want to make sure.
I guess the one thing I would like to say is, I've been concerned about how our counseling is structured. And I think Dr. Prater and I have talked about this. I hope that this might even give us an opportunity to look at that. I think we have a very traditional counseling model, and there might be some opportunity to really start to look at how we use our counselors and how they work with individual students. And, I hope that this work would also engage, that department and those individuals to talk about, really a more holistic approach to a student, kind of like what we're doing with CSIs. But I just have felt for a long time that the way that our counseling is structured, it's no reflection of the professionalism and the quality of work. It's just I think it's been less than effective for a lot of students at all ranges of the academic spectrum in terms of getting counseling towards what comes next. And I guess the other thing I would also say is it goes back to what we were talking about with, colleges have a responsibility of admitting students into their system, right? So they have the responsibility of looking at the preparation of a student and deciding whether that student will be successful in their system. So if they admit a student at some level, they've said you have the criteria and the background to be successful in our schools, in our university. There are some settings where it's an open enrollment, so anybody who wants to go to college now is able to have that opportunity. That probably is a very good thing, but there are going to be levels of preparation. There are going to be levels of academic abilities. And I think that there just needs to be that realization that not every single student coming out of any district, and you can look at the statistics, is going to be totally ready to take on a college algebra. So, I think there's some reality checks within that too. That when you open your doors and let anybody try college, which is a good thing, you're going to take students that have had varying abilities and intellect. So I would just say that.
There's just two things I want to let you know that research is very strong on. One is, if you don't take math every year,
That's what I was trying.
you're going to have competency problems. Number one. Number two, many states are starting to go to a graduation test. And so when you have competency measured by graduation test, I don't know what other way to call it, all of a sudden the graduation courses or credits or graduation requirements shift. And so I think we're going to start seeing some of that competency being tested before they go into the universities. And so I think Smarter Balance is going to help us with that as far as some short-term and benchmarks. And so I think nationwide we're starting to see some of that happening. So our Common Core naysayers need to be paying attention to the fact that we're really trying to raise the bar. So.
Do any board members
Yep.
need a break before we move on, or just take one?
We don't have too much.
Yeah, we don't have
Almost
much, but that was a full one. All right, go ahead,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Harrell.
Just one last comment. As we're working on this concept around differentiated diploma, again, the steering committee has just ended a series of 4 or 5 meetings. We feel like we're ready to expand this out to a larger committee, much like the same process that we used with the study of IKF. And so if any of you would be interested in being part of that larger committee, if you would send me an email, we would really like to have you. And then, Ms. Callan, a comment you made, I think I absolutely agree with, but I want to make sure you knew that Ms. Mammon, who's our manager of counseling and guidance, was on the steering committee for IKF and will be on the steering committee for differentiated diploma. So I agree wholeheartedly.
And I'd also like to commend you for the parental and student involvement on that. I know that I've personally been critical if that representation hasn't been on committee, so I'd like to publicly say thank you for including that. So,
Thank you,
okay,
Tom.
let's move on to 5.02. You're up there again. And I think this is just second reading.
Yeah,
so
right.
Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, then we'll move on to the Carver Middle School chiller replacement.
Little chiller effect here.
Good evening again. This item is for the chiller replacement at the Carver Middle School. It is the original chiller that is there. We've gone through a state contract to procure this. We haven't done that yet, pending your approval. It is through a state contract. Train US Inc. would be awarded, they are awarded the state contract back in March 1st. It would be funded from the major repair budget, and it is our recommendation that the board approves the contract with Train US in the amount of $144,793.
We'll vote on this in 2 weeks, but are there any questions?
Are we fairly comfortable that this is a price that would be below what?
Yes, because this saves us the engineering fee component.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wendt. The routine action items are there for your review. Mrs. Luton, are there any public comments for non-agenda items? Okay. Moving on to comments from the board. Legislative update. Anything legislatively?
One announcement tomorrow morning, if you all get a chance. PTA, the Springfield PTA is having their meeting at 9:15, which is a legislative tomorrow morning at Westport.
Thursday.
No, 9:15 tomorrow morning at Westport. Legislators, hopefully some will show up. It's a legislative forum, so
Great.
if you got questions for them, tomorrow morning is a good time to go pose it to them.
PTA tends to have their questions, so anyway.
And this may be legislative. As I went to vote at the Library Center today, there was a man collecting signatures to put an issue on the ballot, and it's about teacher tenure.
Oh, yeah, that, yeah.
I didn't know if you all knew that was out
That's
there.
good. It's not good, but I mean, thanks for letting us know.
Right, and do we have our date for the legislative forum? Can we get that out?
Monday the 16th.
Monday the 16th. I think that had
4
to
o'clock.
change.
Still there, right?
Monday, December 16th at 4.
Had a
Okay.
great turnout last year, so hopefully.
Okay, under future issues, we've spent a lot of time talking about what we might talk about in the future. But anything else?
I just make one comment. And you mentioned it earlier. I would encourage the board members, if they can, to attend some of those Every Child Promise forums. Because it will come back here at some point. I mean, I would just encourage the board man. I know Ms. Luton's got the schedule, and
I think they're going to be the same week as our superintendent forums too. So
it's not good timing.
It's not good timing, but it's
if you can make any of them, I think it would be really important for you to hear some of the recommendations that are coming out of that group.
I did not know that.
Ms.
Do
Luton's
we
got
have
a
the schedule?
Yeah, there's a schedule.
Can you send that out to us? Okay, thank you.
It's my forums. You can come to those.
All right, we are going to move on to other, and primarily what I'd like to discuss, well, first of all, I gave you each a copy of the community focus report, and it's your personal copy. If you already have one, go ahead and leave it, and we'll put one out in the lobby. We did get a preliminary, there's two pieces of paper. There's a proposed schedule for the superintendent search forums that Mrs. Bledsoe and Mrs. Luton and myself have been kind of interfacing with the consulting team on that. And I think it pretty much incorporates everything that we talked about in our meeting. Giving employees an opportunity to meet and having those at every high school, and encouraging feeder schools to attend those, although they could attend at any one, and then having a community meeting at each of the high schools, student advisory group, principals and administrators having two opportunities for those groups, offering the representatives from the teachers' professional organizations to meet for 30 minutes with the consultants. That's likely to be a smaller group, but those groups can decide who's at those meetings. Business leaders, with the inclusion of the Community Leadership Forum, which is governmental groups. And then a community meeting at, and this is yet to be decided, but a daytime public meeting, either here at a public library, to include people that don't like to get out at night, drive, maybe seniors or people that have commitments. So does that encompass, does that capture those groups that we talked about? And I think we were all asked to give Mrs. Luton specific names of people that we thought should, be invited, to make sure that.
I thought we talked also about NAACP, some of the minority community,
Yes.
separate meeting, and I don't see that in there. And the other thing that I thought we talked about is PTA, separate from just the community or meeting at schools.
I think we decided the PTA would show up at their sites.
Yeah.
But we certainly talked about MIB.
Yeah, we can add.
Okay.
I guess it would be. When you start to invite certain groups, you always have the risk of. So I think what would be the main, certainly NAACP, Grupo Latino, who else?
MIB includes all those, but it's business, that's right.
But you could.
And the minorities and business group could be included in
All
that.
those people. Yeah, they have women.
Okay, we'll get one more time. There's plenty of time in the mornings there. And then the other document is, I guess, the first attempt to wordsmith the kind of the attributes or characteristics that we identified as kind of our top 5 in terms of who we see our next superintendent, the characteristics he or she might have or what we'd like them to have. And like you to review that.
You want any suggestions for changes, just email back to you.
Yeah, why don't you want to just do it that way, Kathy? Kathy's been my go-between. And I think the only thing that I saw missing here was maybe, no, it's there.
What's that?
The community, kind of in a community engagement piece, but I think it's there.
Finance, however.
That actually didn't rise up to, that wasn't one of the
Okay.
things. I mean, this doesn't exclude, this doesn't say we won't look, these were the targeted 5 areas that, through that consensus building, we agreed on. So, it doesn't keep us from, making sure that somebody would have a strong financial background, but this would be what they would be recruiting from. So, anything else under other?
One quick thing. Studio Alternative site had their first quarter graduation a couple of weeks ago. Which had the opportunity. I attended, and Andy Bush was there. So there are many families there, lots of pride, and that is really a very worthwhile thing to attend. Special group of students that worked very hard to finish school. So
They always put them in the middle of the day.
I know, it's tough. It is tough.
And the whip trip.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about that. I think what we've been doing is having that during my president's report. We can all chime in on what we've been doing out into the community and in the schools during that time. Yes.
Sorry to topic, Dr. Fletcher. I want to also thank the board for the opportunity to have that over at Studi. The environment of having it in the auditorium, the gym over the last 20 years really added to it. And it seems like it's maybe a small thing, but it was very nice. And so thank you again to the board for supporting those moves.
It's Thursday.
Hey, don't forget your plus deltas, and we do need a motion to go in executive
Before,
session.
just a reminder, regional meetings Thursday night, Region 10 at Ozark. Must be a regional meeting.
Is it at the high school? Or is it
I think it's at the high school, but,
I'll send you the address, okay?
Move to
okay,
go
is there a
into
motion?
executive.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Bush, seconded by Dr. Frederick, that the board conduct an executive session following this meeting to discuss real estate matters as provided in Section 610-021, Section 2, RSMO.
Oh, I didn't vote. I have to vote. Oh, dear. I have to start up again. You got it.